Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to this month's Wellness Wednesday, The Blooming Brain. My name is Dr. Matthew Sekeli, and I'm the manager of the BC Brain Wellness Program. And this afternoon, I'll be serving as your host for today's wonderful session. So today is a very special session for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, today is UBC Giving Day. And the BC Brain Wellness Program is honored to be involved in this university-wide fundraising event. And the idea behind this event is trying to generate as much donations as possible in a 24-hour period across the university. So the BC Brain Wellness Program has been very fortunate and honored to be selected as one of the programs that will be receiving donations this year. And as many of you know, many of the courses that we offer are free of charge, and we're able to do this thanks to the very generous donations of our donors. So if you would like to donate, please visit our website at bcbrainwellness.ca, and you'll see a link that will bring you to the UBC Giving page. And based on that, we are also live streaming today's event on the UBC Giving Day donation page for everyone to get a flavor of the educational events that we offer. Today is also a very special event, as we'll be discussing gardening, food science, and brain health. And we have three fantastic speakers from Vancouver. We are honored to be joined by the Dean and Associate Dean of the Faculty of Land and Food Systems at UBC, Drs. Rickey Yada and Dr. David Kitts. And we're also joined by BC Brain Wellness's instructor of our gardening class called Return to Roots, Joanne Wilkie. So our first two speakers today are Drs. Rickey Yada and David Kitts. Dr. Yada has a very impressive resume, so I'll only be touching on a few things. But he is the Dean of the Faculty of Land and Food Systems at UBC, and he's had a number of leadership roles, including the Assistant Vice President of Research and the Canadian Research Chair for Food Protein Structure, the Scientific Director of the Advanced Food and Mineral Network, and is a founding member of the Food Institute. He's also currently the North American Editor of Trends in Food Sciences and Technology. So welcome, Dr. Yada. Dr. Kitts has also a very impressive resume, so I'll only be touching on a few things. He's a professor of food and science group within the Food, Nutrition, and Health program, and is Associate Dean of Research in the Faculty of Land and Food Systems. His area of research specializes in disciplines of food chemistry, toxicology, and nutrition, and is focused on production or development of food products that are safe and nutritious. His recent research interests include characterization of antioxidant structures, functional activity of several bioactive plants, animal products, and the evaluation of potential physiological responses of bioactive components in foods. And he's presently working on collaborations to evaluate safety and efficacy of novel food processing technologies. So welcome, Dr. Kitts. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to both of those speakers to start the presentation.
Great. Well, thank you, Matt. And welcome, everyone. And thanks for joining us on Wellness Wednesday and for UBC Giving Day. Before I start, I'd just like to do a land acknowledgement. I'm in my office at the UBC campus in McMillan Building, for those of you who know the campus. And we're on the ancestral and traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam people. And we're very grateful to be sharing the land with them. And wherever you are, I hope you will acknowledge the lands that you're on. So thank you again for joining us. And I'll be tag teaming with my colleague, David Kitts, who is the real expert around food and health. But I'll give a bit of an introduction. Before we get into the meat of and I apologize for that, the meat of the presentation, let me just describe for you what we do in food science and in our faculty. So what is food science? I guess for many of us who aren't in the area, one would think of areas of hotel kitchens, fast food joints, hotel kitchens, restaurants, but it really is the discipline where we actually integrate a number of areas: food chemistry, food microbiology, food engineering. And it's really the science that helps in the development of safe and nutritious and sustainable foods. And we also deal with packaging material. So that's what food science is about. We also all involve food technology, and food technology really, as the definition here describes, or the food you consume daily is the result of extensive food research, a systematic investigation into a variety of food properties and compositions. And I'll let you read the rest. So this is food science, food technology, and this is what we do within our faculty in the food nutrition and health program. So, one would ask, why is food science essential? Well, I've articulated some of the reasons, and you'll see a listing of some of the other reasons that we think that food science is essential. And there's some videos at the bottom of each of the slides, for the next two slides anyways, and you can learn more about food science by looking at those videos. So I won't go into those. But let me talk about the whole focus of today's research that David and I are going to talk about. And it really goes back to Hippocrates, and let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. I think one of the things that we try to stress in our faculty is if we do this right, we can use food as a means for preventative health care. I think, by preventing such chronic diseases as type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, obesity, then I think we could potentially save a lot of lives and save a lot of money. So Hippocrates, I think, had it right when he talked about this phraseology. One of the other things that I'll talk about, which is a term which is being used quite a bit these days, and maybe David will talk a little bit more about this whole concept, but flexitarianism. I think many of you who are on the webinar today are moving towards a much more plant-based diet. And you may have heard the term flexitarian. And flexitarian means that you are actually moving towards plant-based diet, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you've cut out meat from your diet. So if you see this word flexitarian, hopefully now you'll understand the definition. Well, a couple of years ago, we had the pleasure of hosting Michael Pollan, who is an iconic food writer. And if you've ever had a chance to read the book In Defense of Food, Michael has this wonderful phrase in that book, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And I think he was foreseeing what would happen a couple of years down the road when he wrote that book. And so today you'll see a lot of plant-based foods on the market. The topic for today is the effect of foods on brain health. And David will get into this a little bit more in detail. But again, this is an interesting YouTube video done by a colleague at the University of California at Davis. So I would ask that you take a look at this video if you have some time. And, I think the premise of that video, as well as some of the messaging that David will talk about, is it does matter what you eat. And so you'll see on the right-hand side of this slide that there are certain foods which probably will promote better health status, and things like green vegetables, fatty fish, berries, tea, coffee, and walnuts. But what I'll say is that, whatever the food, it's about moderation also. In addition to what you eat, I guess it's behavior. And so if we talk about the epigenetic or environmental aspects of how that affects our health status, we'll talk about this, and David will talk about brain health as it relates to food. But things that you can do to actually modify and improve brain health are food choice, of course, eating behavior, try to eat a little bit over the course of a day rather than binge eating. And that has been seen to actually affect diseases such as Alzheimer's. There has been some work done on overeating and Alzheimer's disease. And then dietary intake and nutrition. I've become one of these people who has become a reader of food labels. And so it's still difficult for me, even me, to read a food label, but I try to read food labels to see what exactly is in that food product. Here's a couple of papers that I've cited. And again, if you have time, I would recommend that you take a look at these papers, the references at the bottom. And this really talks about food choice, eating behaviors, and dietary intake. There's a reference to the Mediterranean diet, and on the next slide, we'll define what that Mediterranean diet is all about. But there's been a lot of work, and a colleague of David and mine at the University of Toronto, David Jenkins, who is the creator of the term glycemic index, is a big proponent of the Mediterranean diet. And so in this paper, you'll see that there's a relationship between Mediterranean diet and dementia. So again, the definition of a Mediterranean diet: vegetables, some animal, plant proteins, dairy products, limited intake of red meat, and you will see on the last bullet point, enjoying a glass of red wine, but also being physically active. Here's another paper that talks about it matters what you eat and how you could possibly modulate some disease states. And really in this paper, they talk about that whole thing of microbiota, which is in our guts, the microbiome in our gut, and how that affects our brain. And that could be cognitive behavior also, as well as disease states. So again, I refer you to this paper if you have time. It's a recent paper published last year. So with that, I think, David, I'm going to pass it over to you, and you just let me know when you want to advance a slide.
Oh, okay, thanks, Ricky. Yeah, welcome everyone, and it is my pleasure to inform you a little bit on what we know and what we're doing as it relates to brain health, and even developing a strategy on how to eat and what foods to choose as it relates to overall health. So our topic today is on brain health, and if we were to define that, I suppose with increased longevity due to our improved socioeconomic conditions, we seem to be living much longer, and we're all very much concerned about the quality of our life as we age. And this, of course, relates to brain health as much as anything, with natural aging and also with neurodegenerative diseases such as Ricky mentioned, Alzheimer's or dementia or Parkinson's. There is a loss of cognitive impairment. There is cognitive impairment and defects in both sensory and motor activities. And the question is, I suppose, is there a role for the diet in preventing these brain aging? And the second question might be, what foods would we choose to enable us to benefit from their protection? So there is epidemiology data that points to plants and plant food systems, such as what Ricky has mentioned, that have definitely had an impact on brain health and protection against some of the neurodegenerative diseases. And I'd like to just fill you in on a few of those examples and relate it to the topic that Ricky ended up describing, and that is the role of the gut microbiome, because we now know that there is a tremendously strong link between what happens in our lower GI and what happens in our brain. So we would probably have never thought there was a connection there years ago, but there certainly is evidence for a connection there today. So our next slide basically is just a general slide to show that a good diet, a healthy diet, really encompasses two primary mechanisms that underlie a lot of our aging process, and that is the antioxidant mechanism and the anti-inflammatory mechanism. And both these mechanisms, there's very strong evidence that certain plant phenols, polyphenols, actually provide a number of examples of antioxidant mechanisms and the capacity to be involved in what we call cell signaling that triggers anti-inflammatory signaling. And this can lead to impacts on age-related cognitive design, decline, as I mentioned, sensory and motor defects, neuroprotections, the apoptosis of neuron cells, and even a relationship to anti-diabetic. Because with diabetes, we know there is quite a bit of oxidative stress associated with diabetics, and that is a leading cause of a number of the aging-associated symptoms of diabetes. So our next slide actually points to some evidence that we've established that polyphenols, which are basically secondary metabolites of plants that are produced when the plant gets stressed due to some sort of oxidative stress or photooxidation. They actually produce these products to protect themselves, and of course they are carried over to our systems when we consume those particular plants. But I would say that the mechanisms of brain aging is no different from just aging in general, and that's underpinned by the mechanisms that relate to preventing oxidative stress or aging. And we call that peroxidation, and it involves the oxidation of essential lipids and proteins that are important in how the cell manages to function. And these bioactive polyphenols counteract the peroxidation by directly scavenging free radicals that are produced either through our own metabolism or what we obtain through our environment. They inhibit peroxidation by sequestering some of the metal ions that trigger peroxidation reactions. They actually are directly involved in stimulating antioxidant enzymes that exist in all our tissues that are there for the purpose of preventing or reducing oxidative stress. And they mitigate inflammation through cell signaling mechanisms, as well as activating apoptotic pathways that regulates, cell turnover. So these bioactive polyphenols have a tremendous amount of capacity to function in terms of brain health as they do in terms of overall health. And I'll give you a few examples in the next slide. The first one is probably the tea catechins. And I think all of you, when you think of tea or you think of coffee, you think of the caffeine. And that has had a tremendous amount of science done as relates to attention and memory. But there are polyphenols in teas, and you can see on the chart on the right there, these are on the top, these are 4 very common polyphenols. And the one on the very far right, it's a catechin. It's a very complicated, large, bulky molecular weight polyphenol. And it has the capacity to sequester free radicals and trigger antioxidant enzyme mechanisms, and has been shown in animal studies to lower the risk of dementia. You'll see here in this chart that if you look at the EGCG, it does vary in concentration. This is the concentration of these compounds once they've been eluted from the tea, and the time it takes when you put the tea in the hot water to get these compounds eluted. So EGCG, for example, which is a very important one, actually is not present in some teas like black tea, because black teas are fermented tea. And it does take a little bit of time to elute that from the tea. So don't be impatient when you're brewing your tea, because if the old question of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, here you're throwing out the ECG when you throw out your tea bag or what have you. But the tea catechins are very well established polyphenols that have bioactivity, but they have a major problem in that they're just too large and the bioavailability of them is restricted. And so this is where it's very important that we have enzymes and in our intestine, in both our small and large intestine, which can break them down into smaller units, which can be absorbed and hopefully transported to target organs such as the brain for direct functional use. And the next example is curcumin. Curcumin is a product of turmeric, and it has a very strong antioxidant activity. As you can see on the far right, it's got a very characteristic structure, and there is antioxidant activity and anti-inflammatory capacity associated with curcumin. And it is also modified quite a bit by the gut microbiome to even more bioactive metabolites, which have access through different blood-brain barriers and tissue barriers. It has a long history of having anti-inflammatory and antioxidant capacity. So it's another very important one associated with plants. And the next group, of course, we're all happy to see this. These are our color-pigmented soft fruits. The anthocyanins, which contribute to those colors, are known to have antioxidant capacity and trigger cell signaling. And in the grapes, in the soft grapes, even with and without fermentation, we have a compound called resveratrol, as maybe some of you are familiar with. Resveratrol has received a lot of attention because of its ability to trigger antioxidant and anti-inflammatory activities in a number of cells. And more specifically and more lately, it's been shown that some of the bacteria in our large gut, Lactobacillus acidophilus, are very, very effective at transforming the resveratrol to even more bioactive metabolites, which can get access to the blood-brain barrier. And so this is a very exciting area of research, and maybe one of the underlying reasons why they say that maybe a glass of a red wine in moderation is not so bad for you. And the next one, please, has to do with rice. And this is the bran, the oil from the rice bran. There's a compound in here called gamma-oryzanol. This is a very strong antioxidant. It's actually 10 times stronger than vitamin E. It's in the oil system and easily absorbed. And recent evidence that just came out maybe last year showed that it could cross the blood-brain barrier and actually have direct activity in different regions of the brain, and was associated with neural protection as well as memory improvement. So there's lots of interest in associated with rice bran as relates to brain function. And the next slide, I think, is the last example, are the saponins. These are very bulky, like the tea catechins, very bulky group of compounds you see on the right here. It almost looks like cholesterol, but associated with it are these sugar molecules. And saponins exist very specifically and uniquely in a number of different plants. I think ginseng in particular is quite well known for its ginsenosides, which are these saponins. And ginseng, for example, has a long history of having brain function associated with memory and brain health. But the other thing that's really interesting and important about these saponins is that they're not only potentially direct agents that could help us with improving brain health, but they are important, what we call prebiotics. And what that means is that they are the nutrients that the probiotics or the microflora in our gut use to grow and proliferate. And so there is almost a two-way application here where certain foods can enhance the growth of the microorganisms and the wellness of the gut, which in turn helps in terms of bioavailability and accessibility of these bioactive agents into the brain. The next slide is just a small summary of what is really important. It's one thing to identify these plant compounds. It's another thing to really be cognitive that there are limitations in their functionality. And we do require a lot of what we call pre-digestion and transformation, biotransformation, before they can make it to the brain and have these antioxidant or anti-inflammatory mechanisms that I've just described. Some of this happens in the small intestine just so that they can be absorbed from the intestine. And we call that bioaccessibility, so that they can be bioavailable. And they actually do undergo a little bit of biotransformation. But the large intestine, particularly the gut microbiome, which I mentioned earlier and Rickey mentioned, is really come to the forefront as being important because there are very site-specific bacteria or a complex mixture of bacteria that can transform these substrates, these phytochemicals that I've just mentioned, to smaller, possibly more bioavailable compounds, and therefore bring about a more feasible and potent activity. And the next slide sort of tries to summarize that in a figure. Here you have your polyphenol from your diet, and of course it comes into your stomach and makes its way through the small intestine and the large intestine. And this is where you get digestion and transformation, both in the small and the large intestine, which precedes its uptake into the liver and then into the general circulation and onto the brain. If it's not bioavailable because of its structure or its size, it won't get across the blood-brain barrier and it'll just be excreted. So it's critically important that the microbiome is healthy and functions well to transform these potential bioactive agents into bioactive agents that can reach the brain. So the take-home messages on the next slide pretty much summarize what Rickey and I brought to your attention today, is that we are very cognizant about quality of life as we age because we're living longer. And aging is indeed a leading factor that leads to loss of brain health, which we've targeted primarily due to oxidative stress that leads to a cellular injury. And part of that is inflammatory disease. The neurons, which are those sensitive cells that get attacked, those are postmeiotic cells, so they're not replaced. So we must maintain their longevity because we don't get a chance to bring them back when they've passed. And there are many foods that we associate that Rickey mentioned in that chart, and I've given you some specific examples that actually have these bioactive components that epidemiology studies and now clinical studies are confirming can contribute to brain health and neurocognitive protection. So this leads us to sort of a strategy in our lifestyles of choosing foods and diets that provide both the bioactive precursors, shall we say, for anti-aging and brain health, as well as a healthy lifestyle, as Rickey mentioned, in terms of activity and in addition to a proper diet. The last point on this list, That's good. I think that the last point, I think I've already reiterated it, was that our dietary choices, as it's a two-way street, because our polyphenols from our plants actually help our gut microbiome function and be very healthy, so that they can indeed transform and produce the products from our diet that get access to our target tissues and provide a functional wellness associated with them. So it's hopefully that gives you a little bit of a background of how our foods can play a role in terms of brain health. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Yada and Dr. Kitts. I really appreciate that talk. It was a great summary of the science that underlines the benefits of healthy diet and brain health, and especially with the interaction with the gut microbiome. And I think this actually works very well with some of the other speakers we've seen with these Wellness Wednesday sessions. We had a session in January specifically on the microbiome and gut health in the brain, as Dr. Silke Cresswell, one of our co-founders, is researching that as well. So I think there's a lot of synergies and interactions here which work quite well. I'd also like to take the chance to acknowledge that the BC Brain Wellness Program at the David Momofagian Center for Brain Health is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people as well, so similar to Dr. Yada's land acknowledgement. So with that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Joanne Wilkie, who teaches our Return to Roots program at the BC Brain Wellness Program. Joanna's soul has always yearned to be in the garden and has been creative in every aspect of her life. Joanna received a Bachelor of Music and Piano Performance from the University of Victoria and several other teaching and performance diplomas while she spent time there. Her combined passion for growing things and cooking led Joanna to develop a gardening program for students at a local Vancouver school, which she then adapted to the Return to Roots program for the BC Brain Wellness Program. So please welcome Joanna Wilke.
All right. So good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak to you today about a subject that's been a passion throughout my life, and one that's also been deeply soul satisfying and nourishing to my family and I. Alongside the pleasures it's offered, gardening has also provided me with physical exercise and a way to regulate and manage my brain health. My garden is the place where my brain is both at peace and stimulated at the same time. If you had told my teenage self that I'd one day be giving an online gardening talk to all these people, I would have told you were crazy. My life journey has taken all sorts of twists and turns, but funnily enough, one thing that's always remained a constant has been my love of gardening. I want to attempt to share that love with you today and help you to understand why I think every human being would benefit from some gardening experience in their lives. I started my journey with the BC Brain Wellness Program late last June and have been running weekly online gardening and nutrition classes every Wednesday afternoon, where the participants and I have lively discussions on a wide variety of both gardening and nutrition topics. Over the last year, our sessions have really become like a sort of club where every member, no matter whether they're beginner or advanced, contributes to our discussions. That's the one thing about gardening. You'll never have it all down pat, and you can always learn something new. Often we learn the most through our mistakes rather than our successes, so it helps to return to the basics over and over again. Participants in the Return to Roots classes have everything from large outdoor gardening space to patios to apartment balconies to just a few pots to only indoor space, and we still manage to explore so many gardening possibilities together. When first setting up the Return to Roots program, I decided to link gardening and nutrition together because I firmly believe they walk hand in hand. One has only to grow their own carrot and eat it to understand and appreciate this concept. I believe that as our societies have advanced in technology, as our cities have grown, and as the rapid paces of our daily lives have increased, we've lost some important and vital connections to our natural world. And as a result, both our environment and human health have greatly suffered. I was asked to give some basic principles as well as some practical gardening tips today, and I'll do my best to sum up what I think are some of the key concepts. It's my main objective to give you some good, solid takeaways from my talk today that will hopefully inspire and give you the confidence you need to get out into the natural world, whether that's to simply enjoy the surrounding beauty we've been blessed with, or to actually grow something yourself. Gardening is a science. Just look at these words. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce these, but those were the official science names for lettuce and broccoli. As interesting as this is, and important, it's not what drives me to be a gardener. It's not what makes me go out and dig in the dirt hoping to grow some lettuce or broccoli to feed my kids for dinner. Although I do believe it's important to understand some of the science behind gardening because it will greatly aid in your gardening success. The science is not what typically drives most people to garden. So, what is it that drives us to be gardeners? Why do it? It's just more work after all. Well, in order to help you all connect to some of the reasons why we garden, or why I feel everyone should garden, I'd like to draw you into my world for a moment. Take a look at this photo I took on one of our daily family COVID walks through Pacific Spirit Park. Many of you may have done a similar forest walk in the near past because that's what we've all been doing during COVID. If you're able, I'd like you to type into the chat right now any words that come to mind to describe what you're seeing in this photo or what you feel when you're in the forest. Just take a moment. Anybody can, yes, peaceful, calm, wonderful, lots of calms, awe, light, serene, air, another awe. Yes, serenity, scent of forest, strength, vibrant. Look at how much this enlightenment, look at how much we're being affected by nature, by what we feel when we're in the forest. It's amazing. What we feel when we're in there, I put up some words here that I wrote myself, like on a lot of the ones that you've echoed, invigoration, or, just noticing the biodiversity, the life-giving, we're calm. Man, the benefits are amazing. Let's try another photo from nature and tap into similar but different senses. Okay, imagine you're on a road trip during the peak of summer. That's what we all want to do right now, isn't it? And you've just passed by a road stand in Karameus. It's hot. And you step out of your car and buy a flat of fresh, ripe peaches picked straight from the orchard. Of course, you can't resist. So you take a bite out of one of them. Oh, the juice runs down your chin. Okay, now type into the chat words that come to mind from this experience. Ripe, sweet, juicy. Yum, luscious, delicious. Life itself. Road trip, delicious. Messy, yes, definitely. Sticky, right? Succulent. Bliss, summer. Oh, don't we all just want to be there right now? Texture, elixir, beauty, sensuous. Wow, the words are like pouring forth out of all of us. Yeah, I wrote down a few. I couldn't help but write the word zingy. Thought it was fun. So if I were to link these two experiences together, which are very different, but they're both from nature, I would arrive at probably the answer to the question, what drives us to be gardeners? I feel it's a connection to the soul. It hits home at what brings us pleasure in life. As humans, we very often derive our strongest pleasures from experiences that affect our five senses. So experiences that involve our touch, our taste, our smell, our sight, and our hearing. We're blessed with these senses, and they not only give us the information we need to learn, to grow, and stay safe, but they also bring us pleasure and satisfaction. Tapping into this connection and forming this information freeway, if you will, between your senses and your brain is absolutely vital. And if you take away nothing else from my talk today, this would be enough. I'd encourage you to find ways to explore more deeply the senses you've been gifted with. And if you're missing a sense or two for various reasons, lean harder into the other ones that you have. Some ways you could try to reconnect with your 5 senses involving the natural world could be: go on a forest walk. And when you get deep into the forest, stand still, close your eyes, breathe deeply for a few minutes. Listen to all the sounds and see what you can pick out. Feel your body as it calms down and becomes refreshed. Afterwards, pick up a handful of soil and smell it. Observe it closely. Can you see life in it? Ask yourself questions about how you think that soil was made. This is one of the first activities I do with my grade 4 class that I lead each year in a course called Garden Buddies. They study 4 different types of soil: sandy soil, clay soil, forest, and garden loam. And just by feeling, smelling, and observing it, even though they are only 9 years old, they can tell you immediately which 2 types of soil would be the most beneficial to grow plants in. Here's another way you could reconnect your sense of pleasure with the natural world. Purchase some fruits or vegetables that you've never tried before. Cut small pieces and taste test them with your family or friends. Rate your experience. Bring words forth that come to mind from your experience, or even better, put on a blindfold and have someone feed you each small piece one at a time. Really take time to savor and taste and fully experience it. I also do this with my students, and they absolutely delight in the experience. It is amazing to watch their brains take in the information in a totally new way. It's like watching a baby taste something for the first time. I'd venture to guess that if the brain were monitored during this process, we'd probably see it going off like fireworks. So, okay, if we know that people largely garden because it satisfies some sort of peace inside of them, I'd like to now draw upon our gardeners in our audience today, and I know you're there because I saw some of your names come up, to type into the chat words that come to mind that describe why you garden. So why do you garden? I want to know. Just some quick words that describe why you garden. To watch something grow, joy and satisfaction. For food, joy and discovery, feel of the soil. To grow food, lots of you want to grow food. Satisfaction, the color, yes, so vibrant. Fresh air, be active, fun, peaceful working in the garden. Health, surprises, connection with the earth, relaxation, the smells, it gives me joy. I love all aspects of gardening. Senses and beauty. Man, we could go on and on, couldn't we? Like, brain and body health. How about that one? The benefits of gardening are enormous. Yeah, we could keep going for the whole afternoon, couldn't we? This is my second key concept and almost equally important. In ways, I can't think of anything else that combines so many aspects of mental and physical health together all at once. If you really think about that. I did that with my family, and we had a hard time coming up with other things that combine so many things, art, recreation, relaxation, exercise, inspiration, rejuvenation, it's incredible. The world of gardening, however, can seem overwhelming to beginners, and sadly, this is often why people who want to try their hand at it end up getting lost and giving up in the process. It's also a world that involves some ability to face failure and to be doggedly determined to carry on. That's my little blue note in there. There are some practical tips, though, that can help you to not only ease into the world of gardening, but can also help you experience some success. Okay, so gardening tip number 1, slow down and observe. Learn to notice things and take the time to carefully observe. Observe the sunlight. The way the sun shines into your growing space will determine the types of plants that you can grow. So, for example, if you grow vegetables for the fruit or the root, you're going to need a minimum of 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. Whereas if you grow for the leaves, 4 hours is often all you'll need. Observe other people's gardens in your neighborhood or at a local community garden. Look at how they've arranged their plants and what they've chosen to grow. Ask other gardeners questions. Find out what worked and what didn't. Gardens need to be carefully observed so you can troubleshoot along the way and learn as you go along. Gardening tip number 2, keep a journal. Journaling and planning is essential. It helps you remember from year to year what you've learned and done. I use my journal to draw garden plans, to brainstorm, to write down plants I've grown or bought, seeds I've chosen, the weather, soils and fertilizers I've used, pests I've dealt with, so many things. Gardening tip number 3, keep it simple. This is really important. It's easy to get carried away, even for the experienced gardener. The endless selection of enticing seed packages and lush plants growing merrily in the nurseries are incredibly tempting. Start with just 1 pot of herbs. Herbs are a must-have plant for everyone because they're not only useful in cooking, but they also have lovely flowers and divine scents. They're relatively easy to grow and care for, and many will come back year after year. Start by buying some good quality potting soil and a few herbs from a nursery rather than trying to grow them yourself from seed. You'll have quicker success that way, and you'll be able to enjoy them for a greater amount of time. Gardening tip number 4, grow things in pots or planters. Large pots and planters are wonderful because they offer greater flexibility for urban gardeners. You can move the pot where it will get the optimal amount of sunshine, or you can grow it close to your kitchen where you'll be more likely to keep it under your observing eye. And of course, they're probably the only option if all you have is an apartment balcony. Because of the varied landscape in my garden and the surrounding trees and buildings, I've had to rely quite heavily on growing things in pots and planters. However, having learned to adapt to these methods, I've found that you can have incredible success and a bountiful yield of fresh fruits and vegetables year-round. And for some crops, I even prefer them. For example, if you're new to growing vegetables or would like to try to grow something this year, I'd highly recommend growing carrots or radishes in a large pot or a planter. Right now is actually the best time to plant them. Once again, get yourself some good quality potting soil and some seeds from a nursery, garden store, or a grocery store. Find a place that gets no less than 6 hours of sunshine each day and plant your seeds. There are numerous videos online of how to do this, such as articles and videos from our local company, West Coast Seeds. Gardening tip number 5, don't just wing it. Use your garden resources wisely. In my first year of really going full out growing vegetables, I used the free West Coast Seeds gardening guide until it was dog-eared and falling apart. You can pick one up at many local hardware stores or nurseries. It has everything you'll need to get started on growing vegetables, herbs, and many flowers. It's also chock full of beautiful photos, practical tips, simplified and easy to understand garden science, and the ever important timing charts for planting things in BC, and now I think even Ontario, which is very cool. Westcoast Seeds also has an incredible website where you can find instructional articles, how-to videos, a garden wisdom blog, regional planting charts, recipes, and of course a catalog of all their products and seeds. If you subscribe to their emails, you'll get access to wonderful lectures, newly posted articles, planting and timing reminders, and other useful information. And they're not overly intrusive, I guarantee. Gardening tip number 6. Grow something pretty, something edible, something that smells nice, and grow something new. It's really important to have something pretty that you're growing. And this doesn't just mean flowers. Leaves are pretty too. Even grasses or twigs have their own beauty. Grow something that inspires you. Growing something edible is just as rewarding as growing something pretty, possibly more so if you actually get to eat it. The joy of eating something you've grown yourself and picked out of your garden is hard to describe. I think this photo of my 2-year-old daughter, who's just grown her first radish, just about sums up that feeling. I come back to the feelings we described when eating that summer fresh peach. The taste you'll experience from freshly picked produce grown right outside your door simply do not compare to any produce you'll ever buy anywhere else, even at a farmer's market. Although that's the next best thing if you can't grow your own. The flavor and nutrients found in fruits and vegetables are at their peak when they've been freshly harvested. So the best way to capitalize on this is by growing your own. Growing your own produce will also inspire you to eat healthier and cook and preserve your own food. It will change the way you think about food, what you choose to put into your body, what food you choose to buy, and where you purchase it from. With rising food prices and food shortages and environmental problems and other world concerns, I think we all bear a responsibility to help build resiliency into our cities and places that we live. And one of the ways we can do this is to help with food security by growing some of our own fresh produce. It's absolutely amazing what you can harvest out of a very small piece of land or just a pot. Our average Vancouver lot of 33 by 122 feet feeds our family of 5 for most of the year. Sometimes the only produce we buy at the store are things we can't grow here in Vancouver, such as bananas, pineapples, and mangoes. Growing something that smells nice, such as a flower or a herb, is another way to tap into that tremendous pleasure that gardening brings us. Herbs like lemon balm, pineapple sage, chocolate mint, or French lavender have the capability to transport us into another world. And finally, growing something new each year as a challenge is always a great learning experience, helping you to expand your gardening knowledge and confidence. This year, because of my involvement in the Brain Wellness Program, I dove into the world of microgreen and sprouts. And what joy they brought to me and my family during the dark, wet, rainy months of the pandemic when fresh food was scarce and I didn't want to venture into the grocery store. Once again, there are tremendous resources online in any area of gardening interest. I found this wonderful family-run company located in Saskatchewan named Mum's Seeds that not only supplies our Canadian microgreen and sprout growers, but also has videos and helpful growing advice for the home grower. If you don't have the option to garden outdoors and all you have is indoor apartment space, sprouts are an excellent and delicious way to get that farm fresh nutrients and taste into your diet. My last tip, number 7, is that gardening cultivates patience. It's important to remember that gardening isn't instant. We've become used to fast-paced everything, fast food, high-speed internet, high-speed travel, efficiency in the workplace. Even our vacations are jam-packed with activity. It's no wonder we get tired. The natural world just doesn't work this way. Plants have their own time, and although there are tricks to alter their timing a bit, patience is still a virtue in the world of gardening. There are cycles in nature and seasons and webs of life that should not be overlooked or ignored. Every single thing, whether animate or inanimate, is important and plays a part in those cycles. Take the soil alone. Did you know that just 1 teaspoon of healthy soil can contain more living organisms in it than there are people in the world? Understanding how to build healthy soil and look after it is vital to growing anything, and all the life on our planet depends upon it. You simply cannot grow healthy, lush, productive plants if you have a healthy soil to begin with. I read a poem to my students each year by Amy Nizuka-Mitato, which is entitled The Secret of Soil. One of the verses in the poem goes like this. The secret of soil is that it is alive. A step in the forest means you are carried on the back of 1,000 bugs. I think this beautifully sums up how intricately we are all connected and how fragile and vital that connection is. My introductory page for the Return to Roots program has a quote on it by Shakespeare. He said, "The earth has music for those who listen." I hope you'll join us as we attempt to hear that music together each Wednesday during the Return to Roots program from 3 o'clock to 4:30 p.m. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Joanna. That was full of helpful tips and great suggestions and very inspirational. So with that, I would like to thank all the speakers, Joanna, Dr. Yada, and Dr. Kitts. Thank you so much for your time and your consideration today. That was a wonderful talk. And thank you everyone for your time and consideration for joining us today. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you next month.